Hey there. Welcome back. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be where you are. Welcome back to Microsoft Ignite. My name is Jeff Fritz, and this is Ask the Experts with the .NET team members. This is a follow-up to that session that we just saw with Scott Hunter talking about .NET 5 and the future of .NET. Now, I've got a bunch of experts here. I've got a whole team sitting here on the bench waiting to talk to you. And I want to go through some ground rules first before we get into our Q&A here in this session. All right. Now, here on the slides, I want you to know that you're going to have your opportunity here to ask questions in teams. Ask the .NET team about .NET 5, C# 9, F# 5, any other .NET related question. This is your .NET AMA. All right. We're going to dive deeper into all the things that you want to know about .NET. All right. Now, there are some ground rules, of course. Please use the chat to ask questions. All the questions will appear to all attendees once a moderator has taken a chance to review and approve. Now, those questions that you do like and you want to see folks answer here live on the stream, I'm going to relay to our panel and they'll get back to you. Please vote them up. All right. Now, we will also provide some resources when the session concludes. We'll have records of all the questions so that we can go through and provide a little bit of follow-up if need be. All right. Now, there is a little bit of etiquette required. All right. This session may be recorded. I think it is being recorded. Help our moderators. Please don't spam, don't post inappropriate conduct and inappropriate comments. Please adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct. All right. And it's right there. In case you need to see it, I believe there's links just below here on the Ignite webpage. Now, here's the team that we're going to be talking with today. Of course, we have Scott Hunter. He's the Director of Program Management for .NET. He's also known as the boss. Jared Parsons is here. He's the C# compiler team dev lead. The next guy, yeah, that's me. Kathleen Dollard is here. She's the .NET Core CLI and Languages Program Manager, including Visual Basic. Fred Silverberg is joining us. He's the Senior Software Developer on the C# and Visual Basic teams. Maddie Legere is here. She's the .NET Program Manager in charge of Visual Studio Tools for Xamarin. And we've also got Philip Carter joining us. He's a .NET Program Manager in charge of a bunch of different .NET tools, including F#. So I want to welcome in the team. How you doing there, Scott? Dan Roth is here as well. We've got a bunch of the folks here, and they're hanging out, waiting to hear a little bit from you. And I've got a handful of questions to start. And I want to start with a question to Scott Hunter to kick things off. We announced the .NET 5 release candidate, and you referred to this as the new .NET Core. So there's a name change there and a unification that's been implied. Can you talk a little bit more about that name change and the unification that has happened here for us?
Yeah, I can address that. So, if you look at where we were with .NET Core, we were .NET Core 3, and our fear was the next .NET Core was going to be .NET Core 4. And at the same time, we had .NET Framework 4.8. So there's like a Core 4 and a Framework 4, and that's kind of a confusing message. But the reality is what we really want to get to is we want to get to a point where people think of .NET as a single product again. Today we actually have Xamarin, we have .NET Core, and we have .NET Framework. We've already announced to the public that .NET Framework, we're not going to add any more APIs to it. We're trying to keep it the most compatible. If you have applications that run on .NET Framework, our goal is to make sure that we don't break your applications as you move forward, because there can only be one of those on the machine. We are now telling people that if you're going to build a brand new app, your existing apps are safe on .NET Framework forever. It's part of Windows. They'll be supported forever. I say that because it's part of Windows, which means as long as we're shipping Windows, they'll be .NET Framework. But the name change was, if you're building a brand new app, we really think the brand new app should be built on .NET 5. And what .NET 5 is the next version of .NET Core. We've pretty much added all the workloads you would ever need. There's WinForms, there's WPF, there's Blazor, there's Web API, all the tech is there. Our long-term goal with .NET 6, the version after .NET 5, is to get the Xamarin workloads running on it as well. At that point, that means there's a single SDK that you download, .NET, And from that, you get the same support for CLI, .NET New. You get the exact same project system you're used to in .NET Core for your Xamarin projects. And so we look at it as merging all the entire platform back together into a single entity. So at the end of the .NET 6 wave, I hope that every major workload that you can build in .NET is available in the .NET 6 SDK. And so we think that since this tech is the future for the .NET platform, we wanted to name it with a higher version than .NET Framework, just to signify that this is the place that new applications should be on.
Very cool. Now, there's a question that's come in here on chat from Matthew Kane that I think is pretty good. I see Philip Carter is already he's already typed in a response, but I'd just like to pull on that string a little bit more here. So, Phil, there's a question here about migrating to .NET 5. If I've got a .NET Framework project and it's in that old style CS Proj format, how do I go about doing that migration? Do we have any kind of tools to help folks out and get them quickly and efficiently into .NET 5?
Yeah, we do. So I guess, backing up a little bit, there's a lot of different kinds of projects. Like you could have a WinForms app that's just like a small utility app that you use every day or something like that. Or you could have, like a full-scale .NET Framework web-style project. And the kind of project that you have, like the answer is that it kind of depends on the project type that you have, right? Like, so for web apps, it's a bit more complicated because, there's different APIs involved. And so there is kind of more of a rewrite to that. But if you have a desktop app like WPF or WinForms, or even just console app utilities, stuff like that, you can use a tool that we have called TryConvert that, aptly named, will sort of attempt to convert your project over to .NET Core. And sort of what it does is it sort of inspects your project and sees what you're depending on, and it basically makes a call if it's convertible to .NET Core or not. And if it is, it'll move forward and clean up your project file and get you onto currently .NET Core 3.1. We plan on updating that tool for .NET 5 very soon. It's going to be a small update. And we're going to take a look at just sort of general convertibility and that kind of stuff in the future, especially as .NET 5 is finished releasing and we start thinking about .NET 6 and how we can get more and more people over there.
Very cool. All right. There's a question here from Ofer. It says Ofer Gal, asking about .NET 5, the release candidate, and using Azure Functions with C#9. Is that something that we can deploy now? And I see Dan. Let me ask Dan Roth. I see a little bit of a reply there, and there was a question also during the main session that Scott was presenting about deploying .NET 5 to Azure. What does that story look like? When do we expect to have that type of compatibility and availability on app service?
For app service support in general for .NET 5, that should be SIM-ship effectively, like really soon after .NET 5 is available. You should be able to deploy your .NET 5 apps to Azure App Service. Azure Functions, I believe, is a bit of a different beast because they have their own runtime that's built on top of .NET Core itself. Like right now, they use .NET Core 3.1, I believe. I know they have on their backlog to move to .NET 5, but it'll take a little bit of time after .NET 5 is available for that to happen. I don't have the exact roadmap, but I was talking to them about it recently. They said they didn't think they would have it done by the end of this year, but hopefully early next year, it sounded like when they expected to have that done.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate that. I see a couple folks here commenting on, yes, that's right. I am a big fan of Blazor. Huh? See what I did there? Dan, can I follow up on that question? Being such a fan, look at that. I really enjoyed the Blazor framework, and I just want to follow up. Can you talk briefly about some of the performance updates and improvements that we see in Blazor with .NET 5?
Oh yeah, we've done a bunch of work on Blazor WebAssembly specifically in .NET 5 to improve performance of running your .NET code on WebAssembly. We run your .NET code using an IL interpreter, and that IL interpreter is implemented in WebAssembly, and WebAssembly is fast. But then we're basically interpreting your .NET IL in your assemblies, and that can slow things down. There's no JIT happening like you would normally have with a a native .NET runtime that's running on your Windows or Linux machine. But we've done a bunch of performance optimizations in .NET 5 to speed that up. For specifically targeting like component rendering, where you're rendering lots of components at the same time. We're seeing about a 3x perf improvement for like rendering large grids of components on the screen in .NET 5. 2x, 2 to 3x, I think, perf improvement for like JSON parsing and serialization in .NET 5 as well. So some really nice perf gains specifically for Blazor WebAssembly.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate the update there on Blazor. I'm looking forward to it. That's a magical series of updates that we have there. Scott, during the session, you talked about this is something that we're going to see coming up here annually, these updates to .NET, with .NET 5 being released here in November at .NET Conf, and we expect to see that train continue. Every November, we're going to see a new release, whether it's .NET 5 this year, .NET 6, and .NETs into the future that might have names like 7, 8, and 9. But there's a good question here I see from Jay Tang, asking about how much effort is needed if developers want to upgrade their .NET applications. I want to ask. I see Kathleen Dollard had a reply there, so I want to bring Kathleen in to help with this. When we think about upgrading .NET Framework versions in the past, with .NET Framework running in Visual Studio, I would go in and hit a drop-down box, and it would just change from .NET 3.5 to .NET 4 to .NET 4.5. What kind of effort are we going to see when we go to make that conversion from .NET Core 3.1 to .NET 5, .NET 6? What do you see as the future here?
So during the course of developing .NET Core, we've made some changes to make it better along the way. And we will still do that when we need to. We'll be working very hard for backwards compatibility. It is certainly important to us that we not break you and you not have to do any work. But we're also going to move forward. And sometimes that may mean that we do have breaks. And it's a little different with different teams. And so C# has a super high bar for backwards compat, and does the runtime. So you'll see a few more problems sometimes in CI/CD where we might make a change, especially if you have a lot of really complex custom tasks. But overall, we expect your experience there to be fairly small, and sometimes, often, to just work. We can't guarantee it will just work because this is one of the big changes we made, is to run side by side and allow you to be as modern as possible, so we can move at the speed of business, at the speed of tech. At what's going on right now, we can move. And so because of that, I can't guarantee that you're just going to push a button, it's going to go, but it's always our goal that is going to be your experience.
I love hearing that, because that's a great story about customer service. It's a great story about listening to where the technical community is going, and how really we're optimizing for .NET to be, as Scott was saying in the presentation, the platform, the framework that you want to use to deliver any type of application on any size platform, whether it's the cloud all the way down to IoT. Really great stuff to know and appreciate and hear that from the team. Now, Scott, I got to ask you about Project Tie. There were some questions that were happening during the session about Tie and comparing Tie to Docker Compose. When you initially showed the first sample there, where it was just referencing a couple of CS projects, a couple of .NET projects, it didn't look like it added much value. And then when you brought in the Docker image, it looked like it now is a little bit more than Docker Compose, and then that next step to do the deploy, all right from the Tie command line. Can you speak a little bit more about what we think that array of features are in Tie, and what we expect folks to be able to use it for, maybe if they're not in the cloud?
Yeah, so there's plenty of reasons to use Tie, whether you're in the cloud or not in the cloud. The first thing to think about when it comes to Project Tie was, we started asking ourselves the question, if you're going to build a microservice application in .NET, well, the first thing you have to do is, it's going to be multiple pieces. How do each of those pieces find each other? And so you need to have some way, what we call service discovery. That's where, your front end finds the IP address and port of the backend application. And then from there, maybe that backend application needs to go find the IP address and port of another backend application. And so one of the features that TIE does is it provides that service discoverability where you don't hard code any of those things. You let our platform do all that for you. The next thing that kind of comes in when you think of TIE is, yeah, we know that our developers can write Docker files and compose files and Helm charts and all that stuff. But do you really want to have to write all that stuff every single time you write an application? And so we also call this an experiment as well. So we're open to change what we're doing. But one of the things that we try to do is in that application I showed in the demo, I never wrote a Docker file. Now I could have, but I never wrote a Docker file. And in the case of Project TIE, we want to enable you to have these apps that can be composed of many pieces and then published as containers, but you don't have to write all that goop yourself. If you want to, there's a backdoor where you could write that stuff yourself. Even if you can take that a step further. I didn't do it in that demo because I didn't have enough time. But if you go to the TIE, GitHub page, you'll find there a sample that also shows adding a Redis cache. Normally that would require you to go find a Windows port of Redis or go find a container for Redis and write the right Docker file for that. Well, TIE tries to solve that too. You can either, if you want to run the service locally, you can write less than a Docker file into the TIE.yaml file, and we'll go do all the heavy lifting to go, grab the image and run it for you. If your service is running in the cloud or on another machine in your office, you can instead, in the TIE.yaml file, describe that to us, and we'll know in that case, don't boot up a container, just go use this asset that's over here, and we can still do the service discovery for you. So really what TIE is trying to do is take a lot of the complexities of building multi-part .NET applications, and then even worse or more, or even better, also not require all of our developers to write all of those glue files and learn the formats of all those glue files to make it work for you. If you want to go there, you still could. In fact, we hope that at some point, maybe TIE will have the ability to actually emit the stuff it's generating and running for you automatically. But the idea really is to simplify building these multi-part applications.
Very cool. Thank you. And I definitely feel that, because as somebody who's spent some time learning containers, I look at Kubernetes and some of the goo that goes around that, right, and Helm charts and some of those things, and it's really intimidating. So to have something like TIE that's able to help me, I'm thankful for that step up there. I'm going to come to another question that we have here about WPF. And the question from Shaheen here is, what is the upgrade path for WPF desktop apps who want to move to .NET 5, .NET Core? Philip, you logged an answer for this in chat, and I want to make sure that we come back and we highlight this, because this is an important thing that I know all of our WPF developers out there want to hear a little bit more about. Can you speak a little bit more about that upgrade path for WPF applications?
Yeah, sure. So in my comment, I kind of briefly mentioned, hey, there's this tool, TryConvert, that you can try it out. It's a great start to like run it on a project and sort of see what the result looks like, and kind of play with stuff from there. With kind of the main goal being that like the sometimes boring mechanical aspects of porting are sort of automated, and you can just focus on code and making sure that the code that you're familiar with can keep running. That there's kind of a dial to that, because like if it's a pretty simple app, there's a pretty good chance that if you run TryConvert, it's just going to work with, you may not really have to think much about it. Maybe there's like maybe you expected a particular binary to be in one spot in the file system. You have to update the code for that, but like fundamentally it should be the same. But for very like large apps, it can be a bit more complicated, and it'll depend on the APIs that you are using. And so there's another project called .NET API Port, which I'll paste in there. And this analyzes your .NET API usage, and it'll generate a report to tell you how compatible you are. And so that's important because there are a few APIs from .NET Framework that do not, they're not available in .NET 5, or there's like an equivalent available, but it's a fundamentally different API. And so you would have to do some level of rewriting there. And for larger apps, that's a good thing to be aware of. But I would definitely say that using the try convert tool as a starting point to just kind of see what it looks like is a great way to get started. Especially because once you're just working with code, like it's a lot more familiar usually for most people. And if they want to, adjust little API calls and stuff like that, it's not too bad once everything is loaded and Visual Studio can build and run and that kind of stuff. So.
Thanks, Phil. And I think there's something to be said there about that 80 to 90% goal in the conversion. You're probably not going to get 100% perfect conversion, but if we can get you to 80, 90%, now you can focus on just those little bits that need to be changed, and hopefully we've already got you there in all the user interface parts that need to be converted and come across there. And I'm taking a look here at the list of questions. I'm looking for a C#9 question, or maybe a question about F# or Visual Basic, some of our language questions that we have that are coming out in this next update with .NET coming up in November. But I do see a question here I want to get to about Entity Framework. And I think we're going to have to share this with Dan Roth. Dan, the question from Craig Franchuk here is, and I see you've already posted a response, but once again, Entity Framework is kind of important. Let's highlight this a little. Now that Entity Framework 6 is supported by both the full .NET Framework and .NET Core, what are the plans going forward when we get into .NET 5 for Entity Framework? Will both Entity Framework Core and Entity Framework full framework, right? Will they continue to both be supported? What's the path here? Is there a convergence we're seeing? Is this till all are one? What's happening here with Entity Framework?
Well, I'll do my best on that one. I'll reiterate what I put in the chat. From what I understand, like Entity Framework 6 is there to ease the work of migrating from .NET Framework to .NET Core and now .NET 5 going forward, so that if you have a bunch of Entity Framework based code, you can just reuse it, and that's great. That saves you a bunch of work. I believe though the most of the future investment is still happening though in Entity Framework Core. So that's where all the new feature work is really occurring. I'm not aware of any like major features planned for EF6 that I just may not be privy to them, but that's my understanding. There's lots of great stuff that's coming in Entity Framework Core in .NET 5. Like I was just looking through the blog post that they put out for .NET 5 RC1, and they now have many-to-many support, which is really cool. So I think you'll see a lot more functionality coming to Entity Framework Core. Maybe things that you used to be able to do with EF that you for a while haven't been able to do with EF Core, you'll now be able to do. So I think a lot of those functionality gaps are getting filled.
Yeah, there's something to be said about functionality gaps being filled, since EF Core is that rewrite and helping us move forward with a better complete story for the next generation of .NET that we're seeing evolve here. I do see a question that has come in here, and there's been one or two questions that have come in about our friends at Unity, and they've had a very good week this week, and I want to congratulate them and make sure that we recognize them. And for those of you who don't know, Unity is that framework that you can use to build games, a complete game framework on top of .NET with C#. Really cool. You can find a lot of folks out there that are teaching about how you can build games and the like. And there's been some questions about, well, what's the impact of .NET 5 on Unity? And I think I want to reach over to Jared here. Jared, as we see .NET 5 release and C#9, Jeff Jacob particularly here questions, do we expect to have the new language features be adopted by our friends at Unity? Is that something that we're going to see them be able to use as game developers?
Yeah, so generally Unity has a bit of a lag between when we release a new version of C# and a new version of the runtime. There's generally a bit of a lag before Unity picks that up, but generally they're always moving to support the latest version of the language. And they're fairly well engaged in this particular product release. I know we've talked with Unity a lot about how they can take source generators and basically integrate them into their build pipeline and replace a lot of the tooling that they have today. So they're fairly engaged in the .NET 5 and C# 9 release. But as per typical, you should expect some lag between when we release the update and when they basically have the stuff available in their engines.
Awesome. Thank you. And just a little bit of work that I've done with Unity, I'm so impressed with how much they're able to do with that. They've built some very cool games folks have built some very cool games on their framework, and it's a real testimony to that ability for .NET to go everywhere. And when I think about .NET going everywhere, I think about wanting to build those applications and get them running on different platforms. And I want to ask Scott Hunter here for a little bit of an update around .NET MAUI. There's a couple questions here around that. Some questions around XAML format and dialect that might be available. Scott, can you give us a little bit of an update on what's happening with .NET MAUI and what we can expect as we look forward to .NET 6 and the incoming .NET MAUI framework?
Unmute myself. For MAUI, the idea behind MAUI is basically it's an evolution of what we call Xamarin Forms today. And the idea behind MAUI is you can write a single application, and that application will then run on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. We think it's an evolution of Xamarin Forms, meaning it's like Xamarin Forms vNext, but it's also rebranded so it actually fits directly in .NET 6. Like System Dot versus Xamarin Dot. But there's a whole bunch of improvements that we hope to have as we go down that direction. One is we'd like to have a single project. So a Xamarin Forms app today is made up of a project per each platform you deploy to. We'd like to remove that so it makes that experience a much cleaner experience. We really want to take the hot reload technology that we've been experimenting with and get it to work across all of the app models that MAUI runs in. And for people that don't know what this is, sometimes I've done some demos where I take an iPhone, I plug it into my Windows PC, and literally within 15 seconds, I have the app running on my iPhone, even though I didn't make it a developer iPhone or do anything like that. And that's using some of the hot reload, hot restart tech. And we want to make those experiences better. There was a question that I answered earlier in the chat, which was people were asking about, well, how does MAUI relate to WinUI? Well, as we mentioned before, WinUI is a technology for building Windows applications only. And so in the case of like .NET MAUI, WinUI could be the implementation of how we paint the screen if you run your MAUI app on top of Windows. We're just waiting for the Windows team to ship that in RTM format. But that's likely to be the framework that we actually would run your app on if you ran your .NET MAUI app on Windows.
Very cool. Okay, and I definitely feel then that we're going to have a lot of flexibility to build those cross-platform applications. I'm really excited and looking forward to what we see as .NET MAUI starts to mature and we see some bits being delivered there. Before I come to, I think I've got about time for about one or two more questions. I want to show the slide here, the call to action that we have for this session, also for Scott's session earlier. The .NET 5 release candidate is available. Check out the slide right there. In this release candidate, there are single file application capabilities. You don't have to ship all the DLLs as a giant folder. You can ship one file, smaller container images, web and cloud investments you're going to find in here, support for Windows ARM64, continued performance improvements across the board, all of the .NET 5 you're going to see. Performance improvements, C# 9, F# 5, language features. Go get it right now. .NET/get-.NET 5. And speaking of C# 9 features, there's a question here about source generators, and I want to bring Fred in to help with this question. Fred, there's a question here from Alfred Myers asking about C# source generators. Would it be possible to build something similar to EF Core's scaffolding where you'd be able to change the resulting files of the source generator manually? This is a little bit deeper question. Do you have a response? Can you help out Alfred here?
Sure. So while you can't you're not able to specifically change the results of a single source generator. So if I'm not particularly familiar with EF scaffolding generator itself. But if you're saying, you run a code generator and you get some output and then you go and inspect the output and you make some changes because maybe the generator did something wrong here or there, that's not in the particular design for this generation of source generators. If that is something that you're interested in doing, and I'm understanding your question correctly, then we absolutely would welcome you to give us some feedback on that. The place to log that would be on github.com/.net/Roslyn. And this is the first iteration on source generators. We know we're not going to hit all of the topics that people want. So if that's something important to you and we're not covering it, then please feel free to give us feedback for future iterations.
All right. Well, that's about time, friends. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you tuning in. I want to thank the entire panel here. I want to thank Jared and Fred and Philip. Stephen Cleary's been here. Dan Roth, Kathleen Dollard, and of course, Scott Hunter. My name is Jeff Fritz. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Ignite 2020.